In the ancient world, the land of Shinar stood as a beacon of civilization, a place where humanity, bound by a single language, flourished under the vast skies. The people, descendants of Noah, had journeyed far from the east, seeking a home where they could establish themselves and build a legacy that would endure through the ages. But they desired more than mere settlement. They longed for unity, security, and most of all, greatness. Their ambition culminated in a singular, unprecedented vision: the construction of a tower so grand, so monumental, that it would reach the very heavens. It would stand as a testament to their ingenuity, a symbol of their dominion over the earth, and, in their minds, a bridge between humanity and the divine. Brick by brick, they laid the foundation of what would become the Tower of Babel. Unlike the crude structures of their ancestors, this was no ordinary construction. They did not rely on stones, but on bricks baked in fire, an early innovation that spoke of their advanced engineering. They used bitumen as mortar, ensuring the structure's strength and permanence. This was not just a tower, it was a declaration, a statement to the world and to God that man had the power to shape his own destiny. Yet, beneath this grand endeavor lay an unspoken fear, one that drove them to defy the natural order. They feared being scattered, lost among the vast and untamed lands of the earth. They believed that by building this tower they could secure their place, ensuring that they would remain together, unbroken, a single people with a single voice. But in their quest to preserve their unity, they unknowingly set themselves on a path that would lead to their greatest division. A city united in purpose but for the wrong reason. United by a single language and a shared ambition, the people of Babel set out to build something that would defy time itself. Their unity was their greatest strength. With every brick they laid, they felt an increasing sense of power, a collective momentum that convinced them of their own invincibility. They were not merely constructing a tower, they were forging a new destiny, one where they would no longer be subject to the unpredictability of nature or the divine. In their minds, they were securing their place in history, ensuring that they would never be scattered, never be forgotten. But beneath the surface of this grand vision lurked a more dangerous impulse: pride. What began as a testament to human ingenuity quickly became an exercise in self-exaltation. Their desire was not just to reach the heavens, but to make a name for themselves, to establish a monument to their own greatness. It was no longer about unity for the sake of progress. It was about control, about proving that they could stand on their own without divine guidance. Their tower was not just an architectural marvel, it was a declaration of independence from God Himself. However, there is a fine line between ambition and hubris. When humanity becomes too enamored with its own creations, it risks losing sight of its limitations. The people of Babel believed that by working together, there was no challenge they couldn't overcome. But in their pursuit of greatness, they failed to ask the most important question: should they be doing this? Just because something is possible does not mean it is wise. They sought to build a structure that would touch the sky, but in doing so, they were also building a foundation for their own downfall. The lesson of Babel is one that echoes through history. Civilizations have risen and fallen on the back of their own unchecked ambition. Time and time again, humanity has pushed the boundaries of knowledge, technology, and power, believing that progress alone is justification enough. But what happens when that progress is driven by arrogance rather than wisdom? The people of Babel were united, yes, but unity without humility is a dangerous thing. They were so focused on their goal that they failed to see the warning signs. They did not realize that their greatest strength, their ability to communicate, to work together, to share a common purpose, could also be the very thing that would lead to their undoing. When language turns to chaos, can unity survive? At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The tower grew taller, reaching heights never before imagined. The people worked in perfect harmony, each contributing their skills to the collective effort. Brick by brick, they built what they believed would be a monument to their greatness, a structure that would defy time, nature, and even the will of the divine. But then, something happened that no one could have predicted: confusion. It was not an earthquake that shook the foundations of the tower. nor a great storm that tore it down. Instead, the very thing that had once unified them, their ability to communicate, was suddenly and mysteriously taken away. One morning, workers arrived at the construction site only to find that they could no longer understand one another. Instructions became meaningless, plans fell apart, and what was once a well-organized society dissolved into complete and utter chaos. Some spoke one language, some another. Teams that had worked together for years now found themselves speaking in foreign tongues, unable to coordinate, unable to understand. The very foundation of their strength had become their greatest weakness. Panic set in, arguments turned into fights, and frustration boiled over into anger. Mistrust grew as people began accusing each other of deception or sabotage. Without the ability to communicate, they could no longer function as a society. The work on the tower came to an abrupt halt. It wasn't that the materials had run out, or that they lacked the physical strength to continue. It was that the people, once unified in a single purpose, had become fragmented beyond repair. In an instant, their dream had collapsed, not because of external forces, but because of the very thing they had taken for granted, their shared understanding. This moment in history serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of human cooperation. When language fails, when meaning is lost, division is inevitable. The people of Babel had thought they were unstoppable, but they underestimated how vital clear communication was to their survival. Without it, they were powerless. They could no longer build, no longer organize, no longer sustain the unity that had propelled them forward. What once was a thriving, ambitious civilization quickly descended into chaos, and soon, the people scattered across the earth, separated not just by language, but by an insurmountable gulf of misunderstanding. The story of Babel is more than an ancient myth. It is a reflection of a fundamental truth about human nature. When we cease to understand each other, we cease to function as a collective. Unity dissolves, and progress grinds to a halt. It was not divine wrath that undid the people of Babel. It was their own inability to comprehend one another. And in many ways, that same crisis of understanding haunts us today. Did they reach the heavens, or did their dreams come crashing down? When the inhabitants of Babel scattered, their great tower remained unfinished, a monument to their failure, not their ambition. What had begun as a unified civilization driven by a common goal had disintegrated into isolated groups, each speaking its own language and struggling to rebuild what was lost. But the irony of Babel is that, on the surface, humanity never stopped moving forward. New cities were built, new nations formed, and over time, civilizations flourished. Yet beneath all this apparent progress lay an uncomfortable truth. The fragmentation that began at Babel never quite healed. Even today, we celebrate our technological advances and marvel at how far we've come as a species. The same forces that once tore Babel apart, the breakdown of shared language, the loss of mutual understanding, are still at work in our world today, only now manifesting in more subtle and insidious ways. We live in an age of unprecedented connectivity, but we struggle to truly communicate. Even within our own families and communities, we find ourselves divided, speaking the same words but interpreting them in entirely different ways. This is not the progress we imagined. This is not the unity we were promised. The people of Babel believed their tower would make them invincible, that their shared ambition would keep them together forever. They were wrong. And we too make the same mistake when we assume that technological advancement alone is enough to unify us. Progress without understanding is an illusion. Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. We can build the tallest towers, the most powerful machines, and the most complex digital networks. But if we don't understand each other, if we don't listen, empathize, and seek common ground, then all our achievements are just another Babel waiting to fall. The tragedy of Babel wasn't just the loss of a common language, it was the loss of a shared purpose. It was the moment when humanity, once united by a singular vision, was fragmented beyond repair. And unless we learn from their mistakes, we risk repeating their fate. God's response to human pride, justice, or mercy? The Tower of Babel stands as a striking example of humanity's tendency toward self-exaltation. The builders did not seek to glorify God or honor his name. Instead, they desired to make a name for themselves, securing their legacy and power. This act of defiance was not simply an architectural ambition. It was an assertion of independence from God, a declaration that they could establish their own dominion without him. Their desire for unity was not rooted in righteousness but in rebellion. They wished to create a society where they dictated their own fate, free from divine authority. But no human endeavor, no matter how grand, can succeed when it is built in opposition to God's will. God's response to their pride was swift and decisive. He saw their ambition, their unchecked desire to reach the heavens, and in his wisdom, he intervened. But rather than destroying the tower or punishing them through catastrophe, he confused their language. This simple yet profound act dismantled their entire project. In an instant, their ability to cooperate and coordinate vanished. They could no longer understand one another, and what was once a thriving, unified effort collapsed into chaos. The construction of the tower came to an abrupt halt, and the people scattered across the earth, just as God had originally intended. This was not an act of cruelty but of divine justice. God was not threatened by their tower, nor was he acting out of jealousy. Rather, he was protecting humanity from its own arrogance. Had they succeeded in their plan, they would have continued down a path of self-worship, further alienating themselves from their Creator. By confusing their language, God humbled them, reminding them that their strength and unity were nothing without him. In scattering them, he redirected their course, ensuring that they would not consolidate power in defiance of his will. The lesson of Babel is clear. When human ambition is fueled by pride rather than submission to God, it leads to division and downfall. The people sought to build a kingdom without God, but they failed because no structure, no empire, no society can truly stand apart from him. This truth echoes throughout history, as nations and civilizations rise and fall based on their alignment with divine principles. God does not oppose human progress, but he does resist those who seek to exalt themselves above him. The Tower of Babel serves as a timeless warning, a reminder that true greatness is found not in defying God but in honoring him. Scattered across the earth, was this a punishment or a divine plan? The moment of divine intervention at Babel was not just an act of punishment, but a profound redirection of human history. In their arrogance, the people sought to build a city and a tower that would elevate them to the status of gods, ensuring their own security and unity apart from the will of the Creator. But their plans were not aligned with the divine order. They desired power, control, and a name for themselves. Yet they failed to recognize that true greatness does not come from defiance, but from obedience to God's will. With a single act, God confused their language, and in an instant, their unified purpose collapsed. No longer able to understand one another, their cooperation crumbled, and what was once a thriving city filled with ambition and pride became a place of chaos and frustration. Their greatest strength, their ability to communicate and work together, had become their downfall. The work on the tower ceased, and the people, once determined to remain in one place, were scattered across the earth. This scattering was not merely a physical dispersion, it was the breaking of a shared identity. The people who had once spoken as one were now divided into nations, cultures, and tribes, each with its own language and understanding of the world. The judgment of Babel was not arbitrary. It was a response to humanity's refusal to follow God's command to fill the earth. Genesis 9:1. Rather than obeying, they sought to centralize their power, to resist their intended destiny. In confusing their language and dispersing them, God was not merely punishing them. He was ensuring that his divine plan for humanity would unfold as intended. It was a reminder that no human endeavor, no matter how grand, can succeed if it stands in opposition to the will of God. The scattering of Babel marks a pivotal moment in biblical history. It explains the diversity of languages and cultures in the world and sets the stage for the unfolding story of God's plan for redemption. From this dispersion, different nations emerged, each with its own path, its own struggles, and its own understanding of the divine. But even in this fragmentation, God's purpose remained. The story of Babel is not just about division, it is about the sovereignty of God over human affairs. It is a testament to the truth that while man may devise great plans, it is ultimately God's will that prevails. From Babel to Pentecost, how God turned division into redemption. While humanity was divided by language and scattered across the earth, God did not abandon his creation. Instead, he used this dispersion to set the stage for his ultimate purpose, the unification of all nations under his divine authority. The dispersion at Babel was not a final sentence of separation, but the beginning of a journey that would ultimately lead back to him. As nations were formed and civilizations flourished, God chose a people through whom he would reveal his covenant and plan of salvation. From the descendants of Abraham, whom God called from the very region where Babel once stood, he began to shape a nation that would serve as a beacon of his truth. Israel was chosen not because of its greatness, but because of God's grace. Through this nation the law was given, prophets spoke, and eventually the Messiah would come. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, would be the one to reverse the effects of Babel, not by restoring a single human language, but by offering a message of salvation that transcended every linguistic and cultural barrier. This redemption was powerfully demonstrated at Pentecost, an event recorded in Acts 2. On that day, when the Holy Spirit descended upon the disciples, they miraculously spoke in the languages of the many nations gathered in Jerusalem. The confusion of Babel was momentarily undone, as people from different lands understood Christ's message in their own languages. This was not just a miraculous sign, it was a declaration that the gospel was for all people, that the divisions created at Babel would finally be healed. Pentecost symbolized a new kind of unity, not based on human ambition, but on the power of God's Spirit uniting people in truth. The lesson of Babel remains relevant today. It reminds us that when humanity seeks greatness apart from God, division and confusion follow. The true restoration of Babel is not found in human efforts to unify the world, but in the redemptive work of God, who calls all people to be one in him. The story of the Tower of Babel is more than an ancient tale. It is an eternal warning about the dangers of pride, disobedience, and the illusion of human self-sufficiency. The people of Babel sought to build a monument to their own greatness, a tower that would reach the heavens, securing their place and defying the natural order established by God. But in their ambition, they forgot the most important truth. Unity without humility leads to downfall. Their punishment was not just dispersion, but the loss of a shared language, a fracture that would echo throughout history. And in many ways, we see the same pattern repeating itself today. Though we are more connected than ever, division and misunderstanding only grow stronger. Nations, communities, and even families struggle to communicate, trapped in their own towers of ideology and pride. The lesson of Babel reminds us that true unity is not built on human ambition alone, but on a foundation of humility and alignment with a higher purpose. The question is, will we learn from their mistake, or are we doomed to repeat it? If this story has made you think, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming videos that explore more powerful biblical narratives.